Miss Marvel, created by Sana Amnat, J. Willow Wilson. Hey guys, how's it going? Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. I hope you're all doing really well and you're reading great books. For those of you who are joining me for the very first time, I'm Maan and I am a writer and a reader and a journalist based in Dubai, and sometimes I do videos like this where I talk about books that I've read and I interview interesting people from the arts world and just talk and rant about random things that irritate me or annoy me or make me happy or make me sad in the world of film and movies and books and culture and stuff like that. So join me, I'm so glad that you're here. I told you guys I was covering the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature a couple of weeks ago, and I had a really good time doing that. I got to interview some really interesting authors and writers, I got to go to talks and lectures, and I got to connect with other readers and writers, which I absolutely love. But my most favorite thing to do in festivals, of course, reading books and seeing what new books I can get my hands on. I managed to buy 8 books while I was there, and they were all books that I'd either heard about or I stumbled upon and I had to buy at the time. So without further ado, I'm gonna talk to you guys about the 8 books that I got from the festival, and I'll tell you all about them. The very first book I got is this one, A Tale of Three Cities, Istanbul by Bettany Hughes. I'm always interested in reading about history, specifically history in the Middle East and specifically history about certain cities. A couple of years ago I came across another book called Jerusalem by Simon Sebag Montefiore, I think that's how you say his name, and I really enjoyed that book. It was really interesting and educational and entertaining. Bettany Hughes is of course the very well-known award-winning author and broadcaster. She's really interesting to listen to and she's a great writer. Now this book that she's written, like I said, it's pretty mammoth, it's quite intense. It covers 3 periods throughout Istanbul's history. The first is the Byzantine ancient period, the second is the Christian period, and the third is the Ottoman Muslim period. She covers all different kinds of subjects from culture, people, society, archaeological discoveries, taboos, wars, civil unrest, and just a whole bunch of other stuff that you might never have known about Istanbul or Turkey. So I skimmed through the book very quickly to see what it was like before I bought it, and despite the mammoth size, the chapters are not very long and it's all written in a very easy way, entertaining, with not a lot of jargon, which I think is really important when you're trying to learn about history. By the way, I have lost my glasses. I can't find them anywhere. If you've seen them, please return them to me. Both pairs. I've lost both pairs. I know, I'm ridiculous. Anyway, now this is the kind of book that I wouldn't necessarily read from the beginning to the end, even though the chapters are organized in a chronological order. It's the kind of book that I would just read at random and just pick whatever chapter kind of speaks to me or seems interesting. It's also the kind of book that I would always have on my desk because I tend to write a lot of stuff about history, especially in the Middle East, so having a book like this on hand for reference is really good for me. The second book I got was Somewhere Among the Stars Stories by Kanishk Tharoor. It is really beautiful. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. It has this silver elephant trunk coming into the title and these little dots which are supposed to be stars all over this navy blue hardcover. I saw the author's name, who I recognize. Kanishk Tharoor is a writer and he's written for some really great publications like The New Yorker, The Guardian, and The National, I think. He writes about politics and culture. So I was very interested to see what his fiction writing was like in comparison to his other writing. I read the first page from the very first story and I was hooked. So I'm quite excited to go through this one, and I think it's gonna be one of my reads for the month of April. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. Third book I picked up was A Boy Made of Blocks by Keith Stewart, and it's published by Sphere, which is an imprint of Little Brown Books, I believe. I think this is a really interesting, precious book. It's also a debut novel for Keith Stewart. Now, I got to interview Keith Stewart during the festival and he was such an interesting, down-to-earth, fascinating, fun guy to chat with. He is a journalist. He has been covering video games and digital technologies for the past 20 years, and I think 15 of those years he's been working for The Guardian as a journalist covering those fields. This, like I said, is his debut novel, and he initially wrote a story about his son, who's autistic, and how he and his son sort of bonded over video games, and that kind of snowballed into this novel. So A Boy Made of Blocks is kind of inspired by the story of his son who is autistic. It's the story of a very young family dealing with autism, which I think is really interesting because I haven't read that many books about autism in fictions. I've never really been a video games kind of guy. I think I had a Nintendo and that was it. We've always heard about the negative side effects of playing video games a lot as a kid. There's violence in them, they're bad for your eyes, and they're a way to get distracted, they're bad for your fingers, da 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 da. But I think this book is one of those instances that breaks that preconceived notion of young people and video games and technology and young people. So I'm really interested to see how Minecraft, which I've heard of, I've never played before. A friend of mine plays Minecraft a lot. So I'll be interested to see how Minecraft and video game and technologies kind of plays into this novel. Book number 4, The Angels Die by Yasmin Khadra, published by Gaelic Publishing. So Yasmin Khadra is the pseudonym of Muhammad Musul Hall. I think he used his wife's name as his pseudonym. He's an Algerian author that I was really excited to meet. Funny story though is that when we met, I didn't realize that he doesn't actually speak any English. He writes in French, he lives in France, but he also speaks broken Arabic but in an Algerian dialect. I speak fluent Arabic but not in an Algerian dialect. Between the two of us, we had to speak like this weird combination of classical Arabic and colloquial Arabic, but we made it work and I got to chat to him for 20 minutes. But transcribing and translating the interview from my dictaphone onto paper was a really interesting experience that used parts of my brain that I didn't know I had. So Yasmin Khadra is a very popular novelist. You may have read some of his books. I have read The Sirens of Baghdad, but his most popular novel, I believe, is The Swallows of Kabul. So before I tell you why I decided to read this book, let me read you guys the book blurb. When young Turambu and his family leave the ghetto for a new life in Oran, the future seems full of possibilities, but colonial Algeria is no place for an ambitious Arab Berber, and Turambu can only find menial jobs without prospects. Then, out of the blue, his impressive left hook opens the way to a boxing apprenticeship. With a chance at success finally within reach, can Turambu achieve sporting greatness and still remain true to himself? The reason why I wanted to read this book after reading the book blurb is because, like I said, Yasmin Khadra is an Algerian author, and this is a book about an Algerian. His other books have covered other characters who live in different parts of the Middle East. He's also a Berber, he told me, and the main character here is an Arab Berber as well, which is really interesting. For those of you who don't know what a Berber is, a race of people who live in North Africa, in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, and they're kind of like Kurds, and they aren't technically Arabs, but they are. It's very kind of complicated. Especially after talking to Yasmin Khadra about this novel and other books he's written, he is very interested in the Islamic narrative in the Western context, which I think is a very important narrative in this day and age, and so I was very excited to read this. And this is written in the first person narrative, which I really enjoy reading, and the first sentence is a killer. Let me read it to you guys. My name is Turambu, and they'll be coming to get me at dawn. Why are they gonna get him? Why at dawn? What's gonna happen? Book number 5. It is a mouthful of a title, but worth every word. The Unexpected Inheritance of Inspector Chopra, a Baby Ganesh Agency Investigation by Vasim Khan and published by Mulhan Books. The title is amazing. The cover is also amazing. I read the book blurb and I was literally hooked. Let me read it to you guys. On the day he retires, Inspector Ashwin Chopra discovers that he has inherited an elephant. An unlikely gift that would not be more inconvenient. For Chopra has one last case to solve. But as murder investigations lead him across Mumbai, from its richest mansions to its murky underworld, he quickly discovers that a baby elephant may be exactly what an honest man needs. So begins the start of a quite unexpected partnership and an utterly delightful new series. Doesn't that sound really good? I love crime stories, I love crime fiction, and this one to me sounds so bizarre and interesting and colorful that I had to buy it. So this is the first novel from the series, and I think it's his debut novel as well that's been published. The second novel in the series is out, I think it came out last year, and it's called The Perplexing Theft of the Jewel and the Crown. And the third book I think is out next year. I don't know much about Vasim Khan except that he's British born and spent a decade in India at some point in his life where he was inspired to write this book. I also know that he worked at the University College of London at the Department of Science and Crime or something, which I believe is probably where he also got inspired to write a detective series. I love it when authors of crime can back up their stories with facts that they know for a fact. Facts they know for a fact. That doesn't sound right. Factual facts, not unfactual facts or alternative facts. Anyway, this looks like a good read. I'm really excited to get into a new series, so I will let you guys know how this goes once I get into it. Speaking of crime and murder and the underbelly of society, the next book is equally as intriguing and interesting from its book cover to the contents inside. The Golden Age of Murder by Martin Edwards, published by HarperCollins and Collins Crime Club. So I was drawn drawn to this book because of the book cover. I thought it was really strange and sinister looking. And then I read the back, which I will read to you guys right now. Detective stories of the 20s and 30s have long been stereotyped as cozily conventional. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Golden Age of Murder tells for the first time the extraordinary story of British detective fiction between the two world wars. A gripping, real-life detective story, it investigates how Dorothy L. Sayers, Anthony Berkeley, Agatha Christie, and their colleagues in the mysterious Detection Club transformed crime fiction. Their work casts new light on unsolved murders whilst hiding clues to their authors' darkest secrets and their complex and sometimes bizarre private lives. Woo. So I initially thought this was the kind of book that is sort of like the Istanbul book, which is kind of gives you a history about the genre of crime. But then I read the first page and I stood there in the middle of the festival and I read the whole first chapter just standing because I was just hooked. It's really interesting and kind of one of those books that I would say you don't feel like you're reading history or non-fiction. It felt like I was reading a detective novel. I don't know how to explain it other than that. I've only read the first chapter, I haven't read anything else, but I've skimmed through and it has some really interesting chapter titles. Let me read you a few. Setting a good example to the mafia. Conversations about a hanged woman. The ritual in the dark. Human life's the cheapest thing there is. Wistful plans for killing off wives. The chapters aren't too long, they're short, they seem concise, well researched, well written. I know that Martin Edwards is a crime history expert, I believe, and he also writes crime fiction. So this is very well researched, very well written from what I've read so far, and it's something that I really can't wait to get into. And it's one of those books that I think I will read from beginning to end, chapter after chapter, because like I said, I am a really big fan of crime fiction. It's because it's one of those things that I don't think I could write, but I love reading it. And really, what a great cover. It's so interesting. There's 3 guys on there. One of them has poison, one of them has a dagger or a knife, and the other one has a gun. So there are 3 methods of murder. Isn't that interesting? Really cool. 7th book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, by Jon Ronson and published by Picador. Jon Ronson was at the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, but unfortunately I wasn't able to interview him or talk to him, although I would have loved to because I'm a huge fan. I was busy working, paying my bills, buying my food and stuff. So a lot of you might be familiar with the name of Jon Ronson. He is an author, he's a journalist, he's a documentary filmmaker. He also co-wrote the screenplay Frank, which was directed into a movie starring Michael Fassbender and directed by Lenny Abrahamson, who I'm a big fan of, and I was so excited to have met him and interviewed him last year at the film festival. He directed the movie Room, which was also a book, a brilliant book. But anyway, out of that tangent, back to this book. Jon Ronson's So You've Publicly Been Shamed is a really interesting and relevant book that I think all of us should read. I'm gonna read you guys the book blurb. When Jon Ronson noticed a great renaissance of public shaming sweeping our land, he decided to investigate. At first it seemed like the democratization of justice. The silent majority were getting a voice. But what did we do with it? Jon Ronson traveled the world meeting the subjects of high-profile public shamings. They're mostly like us, people who say, made a bad joke on social media. But when their transgression is revealed, collective outrage circles with hurricane force and they're torn apart, demonized, sometimes even fired from their job. Do they deserve it? Are our actions justified? Or are we using shame as a form of social control? Now including a new chapter about the author's own experience of being publicly shamed, this is an honest, moving, and very funny book about modern life, full of eye-opening truths about the escalating war on human flaws and the very scary part we all play in it. This book is so relevant to today's world and today's youth and everyone who uses social media. It is not only the era of social media, but it is also the era of judgment and political correctness. It just seems that these days nobody can get away with saying anything without offending somebody else. A mob of people decide that this person's joke is offensive or this person's actions define who he is completely and solely, and they are crucified. Social media is one of our greatest tools, I think, but it's also a vehicle that we can't completely comprehend just yet. It's kind of moving faster than we're able to control it. I actually did a video about social media and about the digital world and how we read stories. I'll put a link down below where I discuss this subject. Jon Ronson's book is so important and so relevant because it really points to this really scary, negative, judgmental side of social media that seems to be taking over the mainstream. I might do a whole video just on this book after I finish reading it because I think this is a really important subject, so I will get back to you guys on that. The final book that I bought from the festival was Miss Marvel by Marvel, created by Sana Amna, J. Willow Wilson, and Adrian Alphona by Marvel. Now I was really annoyed because Sana Amanat was at the festival and I also wasn't able to meet or interview her because somebody else interviewed her, and like I said, I was busy doing other interviews and there are only so many hours in the day and I wasn't prepared to stalk her just yet. I had to buy this comic book. It is the first volume of the Miss Marvel comic, which is the very first Muslim female superhero from the Marvel world. Isn't that exciting? It's about time there is a Muslim and a Muslim female superhero in the Marvel world, in the fiction world, in the movie world, maybe sometime soon, hopefully, fingers crossed. I had to buy this book. I could not have bought this book. Does that make sense? I could not have bought this book. I obviously had to buy this book. I mean, this is everything that I believe in. Comics, science fiction, Muslim superheroes, it's real life. And I think these days we need more stories like this. We need more books like this about positive role models within the Muslim world, within fiction, even if it is science fiction and fantasy. I wish there were 10 other kinds of Muslim superheroes out there. I have been reading this the past couple of weeks and it is really good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Muslim, she's a Muslim, I'm a superhero, she's a superhero. It's actually because it's a really good story, the dialogue is great, the graphics are amazing. Have a look. Isn't that so cool? Look at it. Look at that. Isn't it so cool? Given the fact there are so many Marvel movies and TV shows, hopefully we can see this on the big or small screen at some point. I really think I have a speech impediment. I've noticed the more I do these vlogs that sometimes I don't pronounce words correctly and words kind of just stick to each other, and I feel like I have a heavy tongue. Does that make sense? Some words like literature, I have to really spell it out. I can't just say it fast. The Emirates Airline Literature Festival. So those were the 8 books that I picked up during the festival. I'm really excited to get through them and read them in the next couple of months or throughout the year, and I'm going to definitely update you guys on what I thought of them. Now, a lot of you may have noticed that despite the fact that the books that I chose were quite diverse in the authors and the stories, but most of them were non-Arab writers, except for Yasmin Khadra, who's quite internationally renowned. However, there weren't that many young Arab debuting authors in the festival writing in English. I see that as something of a concern, not only in the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, but in festivals throughout the region and really across the world. There is a really small pool of young Arab authors who are writing in English about the Arab or the Muslim experience. I'm sure there are Arab authors writing in Arabic. There aren't that many young ones from what I understand. Unfortunately, I don't read that much Arabic fiction. That's something I definitely want to change. But I kind of really hoped or wished that I would come across more Arab authors who are writing Arab stories in English or even within a Western context. There was one author here that I haven't mentioned, Layla Abu Layla, who I got to interview as well, but I've read all her books, so I didn't buy any. I'm also going to put a link down in the description for a story that I wrote about the lack of the Islamic narrative and Arab narrative within fiction. I think it's so important to have that, and we need to promote and give a space for Arab and Muslim writers like myself and others, hundreds of others that are out there. Anyway, that's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope I also piqued your interest in some of these stories and authors. If you have read any of those books, please let me know your thoughts on them, or if you choose to read them in the future, also let me know so we can have a discussion on them, because you know I love talking about books and stories and authors. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you guys did. Subscribe button is just down there somewhere. Like this video, comment, I would love to hear from you guys, and share the video on your social media platforms. So that's it from me. Have a great day. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. I hope you have an awesome day reading good stuff. See you guys.